How's it going, Captain Davis?
Still kicking around.
There you go. There you go. So today, I just like to ask you some questions. You have an amazing life story, and I'd like to share it with the other people that are out there that have an interest in American history, because there's a lot of American history part of this. But you started after high school in the military, right?
Right.
So why did you choose to go in the military?
Well, I was 16. I was living in a boarding house because the home life wasn't all that good. I was working nights at the plywood mill.
Oh, really?
On the swing shift, and I'd get off there at 11 o'clock at night, and I was living in a boarding house with a bunch of loggers and fishermen.
Where was this?
I was the only young kid. This is in Reedsport, Oregon.
Oh, okay.
And the gal that run the place there, she took good care of me because I was just a young kid, And,
Yeah.
we had breakfast and we had dinner at the boarding house, and there was no provision for lunch. You're on your own for that, but she always made me a sandwich.
That was nice of her.
But anyway, I started that when I was 16, and then when I was 17, in my senior year of high school, I got to thinking, oh my God, what am I doing? This is a horrible life. So I joined the Marine Corps. Well, actually, I was going to join the Navy, but it was after World War II, and there wasn't much need for new input. And the Navy recruiter said, well, I've got my quota already for this month. You want to come back next month? And the Marine recruiter was in the same room, and he said, hey, I got a no-show. You want to be a Marine? And that's how I became a Marine. That was in 1948.
Yeah, it's kind of funny how life, has a path for you somehow, and things just happen and it changes. And so when you became a Marine, what did you want to do in the Marines? Did you know, or did you just...
I really didn't know what to expect. I had a high IQ, and they gave me my choice of what I wanted to do, and I'm taking the easy route. I said, I think I'd like to be in motor transport. I don't like to have to walk a lot. And they thought, okay, this guy is not motivated, so they put me in infantry. And I was in a rifle company, and A Company. It was first the 6th Marines, and then became A Company, 1st Battalion, 5th Marines. And on June the 25th, of course, that's when the Korean War started, and we were running around the clock, loading equipment and stuff to go aboard ship. And it's amazing, from June the 26th till our departure was on July 15th, and we were able to leave a full organization. We had people brought in from posts and stations everywhere just to fill up the ranks. And we set sail, and we stopped first in Japan, offloaded some stuff, then we prepared to go, and they thought we were going to have to make an administrative landing in Pusan, because the Pusan perimeter was a very small section of land. North Korea had everything else. And we got there, though. We went into the Pusan perimeter, and we stopped their movement south and got them running back north. And we were up on the Naktong River, and they pulled us out and put us aboard ship, and we sailed around the Horn of South Korea and made an amphibious landing in Incheon.
Okay.
And then, of course, after Incheon, we went for the Battle of Seoul, and that was a very fierce battle. That's the last really big battle by the North Koreans, and it just about destroyed the city of Seoul. And we were then pulled out and put aboard ship again, sailed back around the Horn, and we were going to make a landing in North Korea, in a place called Wonsan. And we didn't know why, but we never went in. We just kept going back and forth, zigzagging for almost 2 weeks. And then when we finally went into Wonsan, it had already been captured by the South Korean Army.
Oh.
And there was a U.S. Army was there too. And what had happened was the harbor had been heavily mined because they knew we were probably going to come, for a landing. And they had to clear that harbor, and that's what kept us sailing out there for 2 weeks. But anyway, and Bob Hope was holding a show on the shore as we came in, and we could hear him on the speaker. He said, my God, he says, I've been doing this for years, but it's the first time I ever beat the Marines ashore. And from there we went into Pyongyang, capital of North Korea, and started up north. We went into a place called Hamhung, and from there we proceeded on up to the area called the Chosin Reservoir. And MacArthur was very headstrong, very conceited, and Truman kept telling him, once you pass the 38th parallel, stop. We don't want it, because they were getting information through India that China was making overtures that if we approached Chinese soil, they would enter the war. And MacArthur's attitude was, well, what's a couple of Chinese laundrymen? And he kept pushing us forward, and he even took his airplane and flew the full length of the Yalu River, and came back and said, I never saw a Chinaman. But the Chinese admitted after the war that while he was flying over there, they saw his plane. There were 260,000 of them.
Yeah, I was just going to say the numbers from what I've read and preparing for today is that the Korean War, the numbers are just like astronomical, right? So like
the 260,000 was split off into two groups. 110,000 were going to hit the army on the east coast, west coast, I guess it is.
Yeah.
And no, it was the east coast because we were on the west coast. But they were, and the other 150,000 were their job was to destroy the Marine Corps.
And how many Marine Corps men were there in the Chosin?
We had 15,000 at Chosin,
yeah.
And the Chinese had 150,000.
Yeah, it's like 10 to 1.
Yeah, they circled us. They were totally surrounded.
And they were coming up, right? So, on you guys, the U.S., the UN, or I guess it was just the U.S. at that point, right?
Well, no, it was a multi-country involvement in the war.
But you guys had the reservoir, in which
we had the reservoir. We had one company of British Royal Marines with us, and we had a company of Turks, and they were there with us also.
And this is in the winter. It's cold.
35 below zero at Hagaru, where we were at.
Yeah.
45 below at Udamni, where the 5th and 7th Marines were. They were the first ones hit.
Yeah.
They were the furthest north.
And like, did you have, like, I know now, like, even if we go hiking or backpacking, we go to REI and we have like this fancy gear. I don't even think at that time you had the gear appropriate for being in the winter and cold, right?
They managed to bring us the cold weather gear. We had the heavy parkas and the gloves, and they had these boot packs that were not very good, because if you did any speed walking and with sweat, then when you stopped, your feet would freeze in there. So
yeah,
it was a disadvantage. It wasn't very good equipment in that respect. But the biggest problem was it was so cold we couldn't feed ourselves. Our sea rations would freeze, and we have to keep them inside the parka to keep them thawed out. And a lot of guys just found that to be troublesome, and they just didn't eat. And then the miracle of Tootsie Rolls happened. There was a mortar company mortar platoon needed ammunition, and the call sign for that particular ammunition was Tootsie Roll.
Oh yeah?
And when the airdrop came and we went out to get it, the first package was Tootsie Rolls. And it wasn't ammunition, but it was a godsend, because the Tootsie Rolls, even if they were frozen, you could put them in your mouth and they would melt, and you got nourishment.
Yeah.
And
but even with the airdrops, like, because you're in the mountain area, it's windy, it's snowing, airdrops could have shifted. You know, they could have not landed where it needed to be. Sometimes they would go.
that happens sometimes, but you know, those guys are experts on it, and they have parachutes. When the stuff is dropped, the parachute doesn't open until a certain altitude. So the weather doesn't affect it that much. It's pretty accurate on those drops.
Yeah. And then from there, so you're in your infantry, so you're front lines, right? In this, what happened after that then?
Well, took on the Chinese and inflicted some pretty heavy casualties on them. I think out of the 150,000 that were there, I believe we killed, I've got the numbers in there, I believe that we killed about 30% of them. And they went back into a defensive posture and kind of allowed us to move out. They didn't want any more casualties of their own. They let us move, but they followed us everywhere and tried to inflict casualties if they could. And when we got down to Kodori, there's a bridge on the Funchilin Pass. They had blown that bridge, and we're very truck bound because we had our wounded with us, you know,
Right.
on trucks. And there was no other way out. That's the only road out. And so the Air Force was bringing in treadway bridges, and the engineers were going to try and install them, and they eventually got them installed. And we were able to drive out. While we were in Kodori, they were constantly harassing us with mortar fire and sniper fire. And my boss, he was killed, taken wounded out of the truck. He got the Navy Cross, but this guy was taken prisoner on Corregidor during World War II. He went through the Bataan Death March. He went through 3.5 years of a brutal prison camp in Japan, and he survived all of that. And he stayed in the Marine Corps, and then when he went to Korea, he was killed. Sorry.
No, no.
By the way, the band building in Pendleton was named after him.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, nice.
They got pictures, they got his Navy Cross citation on the wall and everything. Real nice memorial. And he was buried 3 times. He was buried once in North Korea, and his body was taken out. It was moved to the Punch Bowl in Hawaii, and then moved from there to Arlington.
Yeah. Arlington is definitely one of the places that I want to travel to because I haven't been, and there's a lot of history, and I just heard the memorial itself is just amazing.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of history in the and so then after Korea, were you still in the military, or did you?
Yeah, I stayed
out?
in. Well, one Sergeant McClung, during that time, he was in a prison camp. The prison camp was so brutal, they didn't allow English to be spoken under penalty of death. And when I met him, we were on our way to Korea. We stopped by Japan. He would talk to the Japanese people in Japanese. It amazed me. And we got to Korea, who had been under Japanese control for 25 years, and the Japanese language was well known there. He could talk to the Koreans. You know, we got our ammo carriers. These guys that were hired, and he talked to those in Japanese. And I thought, boy, the Japanese is the English of the Orient. And when I got back to the States in 1951, I found a book called Japanese in 30 Hours. And I devoured that book. It was pretty small, but it was very good. Then I found some courses from the University of Oklahoma. And in 1953, when the 3rd Marine Division moved from Pendleton back to Camp Fuji in Japan, I was able to talk to those people there. You know, I was fairly fluent in Japanese. And that's how I met my wife. And she spoke no English, you know. And
Yeah.
I dazzled her with my knowledge of Japanese, and she became my wife for 64 years.
Wow.
Raised 4 kids.
Yeah.
Because I was gone most of the time. An enlisted man in the Marine Corps didn't make a lot of money, and I had to work 2 jobs. And then in 1966, I was selected as a 2nd lieutenant, and she had all 4 of those kids there. With that commission came orders to Vietnam, and I spent over a year in Vietnam, and she took care of those kids. Couldn't drive a car, you know. She didn't even really write the checks. My daughter, well, would write the checks. My wife would just sign them,
Yeah.
make the payments and stuff. And they did that for a full year.
Yeah, I mean, it's just amazing. And I know your family, so I know how wonderful people they are. I find that sometimes that when you don't speak English and you're in the U.S., I mean, it's a different set of challenges altogether, and to thrive in that type of environment is really hats off to.
But she was good at studying, and she studied and studied and studied, and she wanted to be an American citizen, and she was trying to take the test, and they were giving her a hard time. And Brian Bilbray was our congressman, and we told him because they were just giving her such a hard time. And I don't know what happened. We got a call on the phone. They wanted her Monday to come down and take the test. And we got down there, and they asked her name and her address. She gave them that in English. They said, "Okay, you passed." On Flag Day of 1994, she was sworn in as an American citizen.
Wow.
She worked hard for that.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, and you definitely served the country more than gone above and beyond, your call of duty. I think a lot of people owe a debt of gratitude to you, to other people just like you. One of the things so that I wanted to ask is, so after what did you get out of the military? I've talked to a lot of individuals in the military, and they all say that the military shaped my life in this way. How is that for you?
Discipline and motivation. You had a set of rules to live by, and you learned to live by them. And they always made opportunities to do something. There's educational opportunities, like I hadn't finished high school, but in the Marine Corps I finished and got my GED. And then I still in the Marine Corps, and I was got an associate's degree in accounting from LaSalle University. And
so that's how you got into accounting.
That's how I got into accounting.
Oh, okay.
And then, of course, I still had all my GI Bill benefits. And when I retired in 1970, I continued school. I got a bachelor's and a master's degree in business accounting. And this all paid off for me.
Yeah. Yeah, and then from there, we have gardeners here. But so from then you became an accountant, right? And you spent how many years doing accounting?
Well, from 1970 until I retired in, I think it was 1998 when I retired.
Yeah, and I met you in, I think, early 2011.
Thank you for listening to the Savvy Wealth Podcast. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The opinions expressed in this program are for general informational purposes only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual or on any specific security. It is only intended to provide education about the financial industry. To determine which investments may be appropriate for you, consult your financial advisor prior to investing. Any past performance discussed during this program is no guarantee of future results. Any indices referenced for comparison are unmanaged and cannot be invested into directly. As always, please remember, investing involves risk and possible loss of principal capital. Please seek advice from a licensed professional. Client First Capital LLC is a registered investment advisor. Advisory services are only offered to clients or prospective clients where Client First Capital LLC and its representatives are properly licensed or exempt from licensure. No advice may be rendered by Client First Capital LLC unless a client service agreement is in place.